Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a great day today. Today, we are talking about Chapter 2, looking at the structure and function of the cardiorespiratory system. We will be talking more about the respiratory system in another lecture, but today, focusing primarily on the cardiovascular system. So, here we go. With this chapter, you should be able to describe the anatomical and physiological characteristics of the cardiovascular system and the electrical conduction system of the heart, along with the basic electrocardiogram. Describe the mechanisms that control the circulation of blood throughout the body, and be able to describe the anatomical and physiological characteristics of the respiratory system. You should also be able to explain the exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood and understand the mechanisms that control respiration. Your heart and blood vessels make up the circulatory system. The main function of the circulatory system is to provide oxygen, nutrients, hormones to muscles, tissues, and organs throughout your body. Another part of the circulatory system is to remove waste from cells and organs so your body can dispose of it. Your heart pumps blood to the body through a network of arteries and veins called blood vessels. Your circulatory system can also be defined as your cardiovascular system. Cardio means heart and vascular refers to blood vessels. The circulatory system provides blood to all the body's tissues so they can function. The part of your circulatory system are the heart, which is a muscular organ that pumps blood throughout your body. The blood vessels, which include arteries, veins, and capillaries. The blood is made up of red and white blood cells, plasma, and platelets. And the arteries. They are thin, muscular tubes that carry oxygenated blood away from the heart into every part of your body. The aorta is the body's largest artery. It starts at the heart and travels up the chest through the ascending aorta and then down into the stomach, the descending aorta. The coronary arteries branch off of the aorta, which then branch into smaller arteries called arterioles as they get farther from your heart. The veins are the blood vessels that return oxygen-depleted blood to the heart. They start small as venules and get larger as they approach your heart. Two central veins deliver blood to your heart. The superior vena cava carries blood from the upper body, the head and arms, to the heart. The inferior vena cava brings blood up from the lower body, so from the stomach, the pelvis, and the legs to the heart. Veins in the legs have valves to keep blood from flowing backwards. And the capillaries, these are blood vessels that connect very small arteries, the arterioles, and the veins or the venules. The capillaries have thin walls that allow oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, and waste products to pass into and out of cells. Your heart is the only circulatory system organ. The blood goes from the heart to the lungs to get oxygen. The lungs are part of the respiratory system, which we'll talk about in our next lecture. Your heart then pumps oxygenated blood through the arteries to the rest of the body. This blood circulation keeps organs, muscles, and tissues healthy and working to keep you alive. The circulatory system also helps your body get rid of waste products. This waste includes carbon dioxide from respiration or breathing, other chemical byproducts from your organs, and waste from things you eat and drink. Your body has more than 60,000 miles of blood vessels that circulate about a gallon and a half of blood every day. The efficient functioning of the cardiorespiratory system is crucial for maintaining overall health and supporting physical activity and exercise. Regular exercise and cardiovascular training can improve the efficiency of the system, leading to increased oxygen delivery, improved endurance, and better overall fitness. The blood or circulatory system, the cardiovascular system, delivers nutrients and oxygen to all cells in the body. It consists of the heart and blood vessels running through the entire body. The arteries carry blood away from the heart. The veins carry it back to the heart. The system of blood vessels resembles a tree. The trunk is the main artery or the aorta. which branches into larger arteries, which lead to smaller and smaller vessels, as we talked about. The smallest arteries end in a tiny network of vessels known as the capillary network. That's where gas is exchanged. Blood is made up of 45% solids, the cells, and then 55% fluid, which is the plasma. The plasma is largely water containing proteins, nutrients, hormones, antibodies, and dissolved waste products. General types of blood cells, there are each many different subtypes, but main are erythrocytes, which are red cells, and are small red disc-shaped cells. They contain hemoglobin, which combines with oxygen in the cells and is then transported to the body cells. The hemoglobin then returns carbon dioxide waste to the lungs. The erythrocytes are formed in the bone marrow and the knobby ends of bones. The leukocytes, or white cells, help the body fight bacteria and infection. When a tissue is damaged or has an infection, the number of leukocytes increases. Leukocytes are found in the small ends of bones. Thrombocytes, which are platelets, add the formation of blood clots by various protein substances. When the body is injured, thrombocytes disintegrate and cause a chemical reaction with the proteins found in plasma, which eventually create a thread-like substance called fibrin. The fibrin then catches other blood cells, which form the clot, preventing further loss of blood and forms the basis of healing. The average healthy adult has approximately 5 liters of blood that the blood vessels transport. The heart is only about the size of a closed fist. Even at rest, the average heart easily pumps over 5 liters of blood throughout the body every minute. To maintain homeostasis, the human body employs many physiological adaptations. One of these is maintaining an acid-base balance. In the absence of pathological states, the pH of the human body ranges from 7.35 to 7.45, with the average at 7.4. A pH at this level is ideal for many biological processes, one of the most important being the oxygenation of blood. Also, many of the intermediates of biochemical reactions in the body become ionized at a neutral pH, which causes the utilization of these intermediates to be more difficult. A pH below 7.35 is considered acidemia, and a pH above 7.45 is an alkalemia. And it's affected by stress, exercise, disease, and regulated by buffers. Transporting oxygen is a vital role of the red blood cells. When we breathe in, the millions of air sacs in the lungs fill with fresh oxygenated air. The oxygen then moves into the blood by passing first through the very thin walls of the air sacs and then into the capillaries, which are tiny blood vessels in a network within the lungs. Red blood cells squeeze through narrow capillaries in a single file. Hemoglobin molecules inside red blood cells pick up and carry the oxygen. This oxygen-rich cell travels in the blood vessels from the lungs to the left side of the heart. The blood is then pumped around the body. Red blood cells are adapted for the transport of oxygen. They are small and flexible so they can fit through narrow vessels. They have a biconcave shape which maximizes their surface area to absorb oxygen, and have a thin membrane so gases diffuse through, and contain hemoglobin which binds to oxygen. Hemoglobin, or HDB or HB, is the primary carrier of oxygen in humans. Approximately 98% of total oxygen transported in the blood is bound to hemoglobin, while only 2% is dissolved directly in plasma. Hemoglobin is a metalloprotein with 4 subunits composed of an iron-containing heme group attached to a globin polypeptide chain. And here you can see this is the shift in the oxygen hemoglobin curve that it changes in core body temperature. The oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve correlates the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin across a range of oxygen pressures. You can see a line that shows the curve for normal adult hemoglobin, or HbA, And the notable points on the curve include P50, which is the pressure at which hemoglobin is 50% oxygenated. And it's 27 milligrams on the mercury on the x-axis. So hemoglobin is approximately 100% saturated in an oxygen pressure of 100 millimeters of mercury in arterial blood versus in venous blood where it's approximately 75% saturated. The conditions that shift the curve may affect oxygen delivery to the tissues. The effects are most pronounced at low partial pressures of oxygen. Conditions that shift the curve to the left increase the oxygen affinity. Hemoglobin holds more tightly onto oxygen and delivers less oxygen to the tissues at a given arterial oxygen pressure. The left shift curve for HB for iron, for the hemoglobin, which allows transfer of oxygen from the maternal to fetal circulation. Conditions that shift the curve to the right decrease oxygen affinity, and hemoglobin holds less tightly onto oxygen and delivers more oxygen to the tissues at a given arterial oxygen pressure. The Bohr effect describes how the affinity of hemoglobin for oxygen changes depending on the local biochemical conditions. An increase in acidity, temperature, and the concentration of intermediate chemicals in the conversion of sugar to energy, and decreases in hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen, causing oxygen to diffuse into the tissues. The local availability of oxygen also affects whether oxygen tends to bind or dissociate from hemoglobin. Exercise causes an increase in acidity, temperature and metabolic intermediates, and a decrease in oxygen in your muscle tissues. This causes an increased dissociation of oxygen from your blood flowing through your muscles, supplying them with the much needed oxygen. Your body increases blood flow to your muscles to supply them with more oxygen. Warming up before exercise can help prime your muscles to receive ample oxygen by kickstarting metabolism and increasing temperature. The heart muscle is the myocardium, or a middle layer of the heart wall. The myocardium is responsible for the contractile function of the cardiopump. The sinoatrial node is a small body of specialized muscle fibers located in the right atrium of the heart, whose activity is responsible for initiating the heartbeat. The circulatory system, or cardiovascular system, pumps blood from the heart to the lungs to get oxygen. The heart then sends oxygenated blood through the arteries to the rest of the body. The veins carry oxygen-poor blood back to the heart to start the circulation process over again. Your circulatory system is critical to healthy organs, muscles, and tissue. The heart is a pump, and usually it beats about 60 to 100 times per minute. With each heartbeat, the heart is sending blood throughout our bodies, carrying oxygen to every cell. After delivering the oxygen, the blood returns to the heart. The heart then sends the blood to the lungs to pick up more oxygen, and that cycle repeats itself over and over again. The heart has 4 chambers, 2 on top that you can see here in the picture, and 2 on the bottom. The 2 bottom chambers are the right ventricle and the left ventricle. These pump blood out of the heart. A wall called the interventricular septum is between the 2 ventricles. You can see that it's a little thickened wall there between the 2 ventricles at the bottom. The 2 top chambers are the right and left atrium. They receive the blood entering the heart. A wall called the interatrial septum is between the atria. Your heart's conduction system is the network of nodes, which are groups of cells that can be either nerve or muscle tissue, specialized cells, and electrical signals that keep your heart beating. There are 2 types of cells that control your heartbeat. There are conducting cells that carry the electric signals, and then there are muscle cells that control your heart's contractions. Your heart, or cardiac conduction system, sends the signal to start a heartbeat. It also signals that it also sends signals that tell different parts of your heart to relax and contract or squeeze. This process of contracting and relaxing controls blood flow through your heart and to the rest of your body. Our heart is a pump that sends blood through your body. For each heartbeat, electrical signals travel through the conduction pathway of your heart. It starts when your sinoatrial node that you can see up here in the top right-hand corner of that right atrium creates an excitation signal. This signal is like electricity traveling through wires to an appliance in your home. Your sinoatrial node is sometimes called your heart's natural pacemaker. It sends the electrical impulses that start the heartbeat. The SA node is in the upper part of your heart's right atrium. It is at the edge of your atrium near your superior vena cava, which is the vein that brings oxygen-poor blood from your body to your heart. Your autonomic nervous system controls how fast or slow your SA node sends electrical signals. This part of the nervous system directs hormones that control your heart rate based on what you are doing. For example, your heart rate increases during exercises and it slows when you are asleep. The autonomic nervous system includes your sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight response, and makes your SA node work faster, which increases your heart rate. The parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digestive response, and makes your SA node work slower, which decreases your heart rate. The atrioventricular node, if you'll note on the picture here, it's midway between the top of the right atria to the right ventricle, and it delays the SA node's electrical signal. It delays the signal by a consistent amount of time, which is a fraction of a second. The delay ensures that your atria are empty of blood before the contraction stops. The atria are the heart's upper chambers. They receive blood from your body and empty it into the ventricles. Your AV node is located in an area known as the triangle of Koch, located between the septal leaflet of the tricuspid valve, the coronary sinus, and the membranous portion of the intraatrial septum. This is near the central area of the heart. Now the bundle of His, you'll see the bundle of His is also called the atrioventricular bundle. It is a bundle of fibers or nerve cells that extend from your AV node. This fiber bundle receives the electrical signal from the AV node and carries it to the Purkinje fibers. You can see those down at the far right-hand corner. The bundle of His runs down the length of the interventricular septum, the structure that separates your right and left ventricles. The bundle of His has two branches. You have a left bundle branch that sends electrical signals through the Purkinje fibers to your left ventricle. You can see left bundle branch. And then the right bundle branch that sends electrical signals through the Purkinje fibers to your right ventricle. Now, the Purkinje fibers are branches of specialized nerve cells. They send electrical signals very quickly to your heart and right and left heart ventricles. Your Purkinje fibers are in the subendocardial surface of your ventricle walls. You can see that's a muscle there. That subendocardial surface is part of the endocardium, the inner layer of tissue that lines your heart's chambers. When the Purkinje fibers deliver electrical signals to your ventricles, the ventricles contract. As they contract, blood flows from your right ventricle to your pulmonary arteries and from your left ventricle to your aorta. The aorta is the body's largest artery. You can see it there. It's the red tube. Looks like a horseshoe. It sends blood from your heart to the rest of the body, which is one reason why you'll see that the left ventricle wall is a little larger than the right ventricle wall. It's because it's having to send blood to the rest of the body versus the right ventricle that only has to send it to your lungs. The excitation signal travels to your right atria, the top heart chambers, telling them to contract. Then it goes to the AV node, delaying the signal until your atria are empty of blood. The bundle of His carries the signal to the Purkinje fibers, and the Purkinje fibers to your ventricles, causing them to contract. These steps make up one full contraction of your heart muscle. Your heart conduction system sends out thousands of these signals per day to keep your heart beating. The electrical signals that travel through your heart conduction system cause your heart to expand and contract. These contractions control how blood flows through your heart. Ideally, the electrical conduction system keeps up a steady, even heart rate. It also helps your heart speed up when you need more blood and oxygen, or slow down when it's time to rest. So blood comes into the right atrium from the body, moves into the right ventricle, and is pushed into the pulmonary arteries and the lungs. After picking up oxygen, the blood travels back to the heart through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium, to the left ventricle, and out to the body's tissues through the aorta. Veins are bringing blood to the right side of the heart. And you have the pulmonary arteries that are carrying the blood to your lungs where it receives oxygen. The pulmonary veins move the blood, oxygen-rich blood, to the left side of the heart. The aorta, which is the main artery in your body, carries the blood from the left side of your heart to the rest of your body through many branches of arteries. Then you have the capillaries, which with their thin walls allow that oxygen and nutrients, the carbon dioxide and waste products to pass through and exchange to and from the cells. The veins that carry the blood back to your heart, and the process begins again. So these arteries are strong muscular blood vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood from your heart to your body. They handle a large amount of force and pressure from your blood flow, but don't carry a large volume of blood. At any given time, only about 10 to 15% of your body's blood is in your arteries. Now the arterioles that's where arteries branch into the smaller blood vessels that are called arterioles. Both arteries and arterioles are very flexible. They get bigger or smaller to help maintain your body's blood pressure. The capillaries are tiny blood vessels that have thin walls, and that's the oxygen and nutrients from the blood can move through the walls, get into the organs and tissues. Capillaries also take waste products away from your tissues. Capillaries are where oxygen and nutrients are exchanged for carbon dioxide and waste. That side of gas and nutrient exchange with functioning tissues of the body, the alveoli and the muscle cells. Now the veins begin as tiny vessels called venules and get gradually larger, as we talked about, as they near your heart. The venules receive blood from capillaries. One thing you will notice is that anything coming from arteries, if you have a cut, it's going to bleed bright red. If it's coming from a vein, it's going to be darker in color because it's less oxygenated. A little fun fact there. Veins, unlike arteries, don't have to carry highly pressured blood, but they do have to carry large volumes of deoxygenated blood back to your heart. So when you nick an artery, it's going to pulse out. It's going to be very pressurized. So you can tell whether you've nicked an artery or a vein by those little snippets. Anyway, thin, less elastic walls help them handle high volumes of blood and low pressure. Most veins have valves that open and close. The valves control blood flow and keep your blood flowing in one direction. About 75% of your blood is in your veins. An electrocardiogram records the electrical signals in the heart. It's a common and painless test used to quickly detect heart problems and monitor the heart's health. An electrocardiogram, also called ECG or EKG, is often done in a healthcare provider's office, a clinic, or a hospital room. ECG machines are standard equipment in operating rooms and ambulances. Some personal devices, such as smartwatches, offer ECG monitoring. Each ECG cycle consists of 5 waves. You have the P, Q, R, S, and T wave. You can see them here on the diagram below. They correspond to different phases of the heart activities. So the P wave represents the normal atrium depolarization, or the upper heart chambers. The QRS complex, which you can see is rather large, as one single heartbeat. It corresponds to the depolarization of the right and left ventricles, which are the lower chambers of the heart. The T wave represents the repolarization or recovery of the ventricles. To interpret an ECG, one needs to focus on the frequency, which is the heart rate, regularity, so how consistent are are the beats, are the waves, their shape and size of the individual waves, and the timing and interaction between the waves. And you can see the diagram below that shows the component of an EKG cycle. The P wave occurs when both left and right atria are full of blood and the SA node fires. The signal causes both atria to contract and pump blood to the ventricles or the lower chambers. Any abnormality is generally associated with the SA node and the atria. The QRS waves together are referred to as a QRS complex, even if some of its components are missing. It is the electrical force generated by ventricular depolarization and represents the pumping action of the ventricles. After the contraction empties the blood in the ventricles, they begin to relax, which is marked by the T wave. The normal T wave is asymmetrical. You can kind of see there, it kind of, there's a little gradual slope on the first half, more so than on the second half. Peripheral vascular resistance or systemic vascular resistance, SVR, is the resistance in the circulatory system that is used to create blood pressure, the flow of blood, and is also a component of cardiac function. When blood vessels constrict or vasoconstrict, this leads to an increase in SVR. When blood vessels dilate or vasodilation, this leads to a decrease in SVR. If referring to resistance within the pulmonary vasculature, this is called pulmonary vascular resistance. Increases in peripheral vascular resistance or blood volume and cardiac output result in higher blood pressure. Conversely, decreases in any of these factors lead to lower blood pressure. Three main sources of peripheral resistance is blood vessel diameter, blood viscosity, so how viscous is the blood, and the total vessel length. The cardiac cycle is a series of pressure changes that take place within the heart. The pressure changes result in the movement of blood through different chambers of the heart and the body as a whole. These pressure changes originate as conductive electrochemical changes within the myocardium that result in the concentric contraction of cardiac muscle, as we've talked about. Valves within the heart direct blood movement, which leads to organized propulsion of blood into the next chamber. A single cycle of cardiac activity can be divided into two basic phases, diastole and systole. Diastole represents the period of time when the ventricles are relaxed. They're not contracting. Throughout most of this period, blood is passively flowing from the left atrium and right atrium into the left ventricle and right ventricle, respectively. The blood flows through the atrioventricular valves, the mitral and tricuspid, that separate the atria from the ventricles. The right atrium receives venous blood from the body through the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, and that left atrium receives oxygenated blood from lungs through 4 pulmonary veins that enter the left atrium. At the end of diastole, both atria contract, which propels an additional amount of blood into the ventricles. Systole represents the time during which the left and right ventricles contract and eject blood into the aorta and pulmonary artery, respectively. During systole, the aortic and pulmonic valves open to permit ejection into the aorta and pulmonary artery. The atrioventricular valves are closed during systole. Therefore, no blood is entering the ventricles. However, blood continues to enter the atria through the vena cava and pulmonary veins. The cardiac cycle diagram here shown depicts changes in aortic pressure, left ventricular pressure and left atrial pressure, left ventricular volume, and heart sounds during a single cycle of cardiac contraction and relaxation. These changes are related in time to the electrocardiogram. The definition of mean arterial pressure is the average arterial pressure throughout one cardiac cycle of systole and diastole. The MAP, or mean arterial pressure, is influenced by cardiac output and systemic vascular resistance. each of which is influenced by several variables. Cardiac output is calculated as the product of heart rate times stroke volume. The determination of stroke volume is by ventricular entropy and preload. Preload is affected by blood volume and the compliance of veins. So increasing the blood volume increases the preload, increasing stroke volume, and therefore increasing cardiac output. Afterload affects the stroke volume, and then an increase in afterload will decrease stroke volume. Systemic vascular resistance is determined primarily by the radius of the blood vessels, and decreasing the radius of the vessels increases vascular resistance. So increasing the radius of the blood vessels would have the opposite effect. Blood viscosity can also affect systemic vascular resistance. An increase in hematocrit will increase blood viscosity and increase systemic vascular resistance. Viscosity, however, is considered only to play a minor role in systemic vascular resistance. So an increase in hematocrit would be an increase in red blood cells. Cardiac output is the amount of blood pumped by the heart per minute and is the mechanism whereby blood flows around the body, especially providing blood flow to the brain and other vital organs. The body's demand for oxygen changes, such as during exercise, and the cardiac output is altered by modulating both heart rate and stroke volume, which is the volume of blood ejected by the heart with each beat. As a result, the regulation of cardiac output is subject to a complex mechanism involving the autonomic nervous system, endocrine and paracrine signaling pathways. The Frank-Starling law states that the stroke volume of the left ventricle will increase as the left ventricular volume increases due to the myocyte stretch, causing a more forceful systolic contraction. This assumes that other factors remain constant. The increased filling pressure of the right heart results in increased cardiac output. Any increase in output of the right heart is quickly communicated to the left heart as an increased filling pressure. And these are my references. This concludes our discussion over the cardiovascular system. We will delve into the respiratory system in our next lecture. I look forward to talking with you again. Have a great day.